Hey everybody, this is Wendi Stott and I am with Keller Williams and I am here with my friend Jon LaKamp, all things insurance at State Farm, one of the very best insurance agencies for the past 84 years,
Thank
I
you,
might
Wendi.
say. Yes.
Appreciate it.
And so they are number one, and that's why I've got Jon here because we've got a lot of important things that we want to share with you about homeowners insurance, what's important, some questions you may have that we're going to answer for you. And so, Jon, I would love for you to, first of all, can you just briefly explain what all homeowners insurance covers
Sure.
and why it's important for homeowners to make sure that they've got all the right questions and get with the right insurance agent?
Sure. No, we always pride on trying to educate our customers. When anytime they're getting a quote, whether they've just bought a house or they're been with an insurance carrier and they're not happy with the claim situation,
Right.
we're always talking to people about what is included in a homeowner's policy. And I think the biggest piece that people focus on is the structural coverage. What it's going to take that if there is a fire, if there is a tornado,
Or a flood.
or flood, or anything that may be covered. What is it going to take to rebuild my home?
Right.
Beyond that, there's also personal property coverage, all the stuff inside. If we always say, if you could take your house, turn it upside down and shake it, everything that comes out is personal property. That's a separate line item on your policy. So it's a percentage of the structural coverage. So we
Okay.
really focus on the structural because getting that will dictate many of the other coverages in the policy.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I didn't really think that much about, all the things that are in your home. I know you and I have talked through BNI. We're both members of BNI, and we've talked about, hey, you know what? If you have large items like jewelry,
Yeah.
things like that, you've got weapons or whatever, those things are important too. So
Firearms,
that's
yeah.
always good to know that not everybody thinks about.
Well, they do. They don't. And every policy will have limits for certain categories like firearms, like jewelry, as I always call them, like kind of high ticket items, things that
Right.
are usually over about $2,000 or $3,000 in value.
Mm-hmm.
We usually want to schedule those separately with a different deductible, different than your homeowner's deductible,
Right.
because those items have a higher value and they're considered personal property. But every homeowner's policy has limits on personal property. So if you have some of those items, furniture, jewelry, firearms, sports equipment, electronics, we want to know about those so we can look at protecting those in a different way.
Okay, fantastic. Well, so what are the most common misconceptions that buyers may have, like when they're going through their loan process and they're getting all that's the information they need, and one of the things for their escrow is their homeowners insurance. So, what are some of the misconceptions that buyers might have about homeowners insurance?
Well, we get a lot of calls from people thinking that their homeowners is there to protect, like what a warranty does. And that's for at State Farm, that's not really something we try to focus on, because the things like your refrigerator or your air conditioning system, if you're not maintaining those, they're going to go bad after a certain number of years.
Right.
You want to have a home warranty program that's going to sit there and specifically look at those items, kind of like the high ticket items for personal property. You want to have those for those major appliances, your hot water heater, things of that nature. That's a separate policy.
Okay.
We're there for more of the catastrophic. As I always kind of jokingly say, the tree that falls in the living room, that's when I want to hear about it.
I did sell a house, and I sold this house 3 times actually.
Oh, wow.
And the second time that I sold it, it was winter, and of course, exactly that happened. I always look when I'm showing property at the trees that are surrounding the area, because it's the pine trees that make me nervous.
Yep.
They're shallow rooted. And the second time that I sold it, it was wintertime. I was out showing property. I get a phone call, and a pine tree, literally, it split the house in half.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So what you say is a tree comes.
And that leads to another misconception that, they call it one of our adjusters at one point kind of joked and said, they call it a homeowner's policy for a reason. We're not covering the outside trees. Right. So it's really the homeowner's responsibility to sit there and look at trees that are too close, that are starting to die in certain areas, and even neighbors' trees, because I'll tell you, the trees and roofs are the 2 biggest areas with the homeowner's policy. Right. Where people will sit there and get in arguments with neighbors, or what's the condition of my roof? And that's something else I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute, but making sure that you really keep up with that, again, maintenance on the house. And it's outside the house as well as the inside. Right. Because what happens on the outside will affect potentially what's going on with your house.
Well, and that's why it's important to have a good real estate agent that has done that, lived that experience, to say, hey, I know you love all the oohs and ahs about this, the layout, the pretty decor and all that, but hey, let's think about this. you've got a tree right here against your home,
Yeah.
and you see that the branches are overhanging. Well, what does that do to the life expectancy of
Of the
your
roof.
roof?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So, I mean, we can go ahead and talk about that if you want to. As far as the roof, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how do you know that you're in a high risk zone or you do need additional coverage, as far as, how the condition of something can impact
Sure.
your insurance policy on a home. So let's say that I'm out there and I'm with buyers and we're looking at a home that was built in, say, the year 2000, and it's an original roof. Well, that's 25-year-old roof. How does that impact their homeowner's insurance on the
Yeah.
datedness of that roof if it's not been replaced?
It's funny because I don't know that there's an exact science to it other than you really have to get up on the roof. And the roofers that we know like to get up on the roof and really see where the wear and tear is.
Right.
At the end of the day, at State Farm, what we're trying to do to get in front of this roof replacement, you see a lot of these roofing companies that, hey, I need a free roof. Ask me how. That's not one of the top lists that's on my list of vendors that I like to go through because I want someone that's going to go through and really get up on the roof and really look and understand the storm damage.
And we'll get Michelle in there for
And we'll
that.
get, I was going to say, we'll get Michelle, our good friend, and BNI on that. State Farm has started to actually go through and take aerial photos across the entire United States. We have a company that goes through, has an airplane that will go through 3 or 4 times a year. So we're getting quarterly updates on every house on a macro level that when we type in and look to write a homeowner's policy, when we put in the address, we'll find an aerial photo. That aerial photo then gets examined by an AI tool that's looking for abnormalities in the roof. Actually look for wear and tear. So when we see some of these, sometimes we get alerted that, hey, this isn't a house that's eligible because roofs have been exploited so much and there's so much subjectivity. And unless you're up on the roof, and unfortunately, there's been some bad roofing companies that have taken a little bit of some wear and tear and tried to make it look worse, like it is storm damage.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, your homeowner's policy is there that if there's a large enough loss on a roof, we're going to pay for it.
Right.
But a 20-year-old, all the good roofers that I trust, 15 to 20 years is about the time you really need to get somebody up there every other year, if not every year, looking at the roof to see, is it starting to wear in certain areas? Are there preventative measures that I can take? And we've got a good person that can do that, Michelle, with the Scenic Roofing.
With Scenic Commercial Roofing, and she does do that. Even though it's Scenic Commercial, she doesn't just do commercial.
They do residential as well.
They do a lot of residential, and that's one thing I learned from her about roofing is that you can actually maintain your roof.
You can,
and I mean,
and you can maintain it by pruning back the trees, not having trees so close in the leaves or the pine needles or things like that.
That are sitting there.
In Tennessee, the one thing that I've heard is that with the different types of trees, with the heat that we get in the summer, the cool we get in the winter,
the rain that we have right now,
the rain amount, so we're getting roofs get worn quicker. A lot of times roofing companies will say, "Hey, this has got a 25-year guarantee." I don't know many that hold that guarantee.
Right.
Roofs in Tennessee typically have a 15 to 20-year life on them. They might go longer. It just depends on how much sun they're getting, how many leaves are left up on the roof, and are you getting somebody up there to look at it every year?
Right.
So,
well, that's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine last night, and their roof is not very old. She was talking about she's doing some things to her kitchen remodel and stuff. She's like, you know what? I may have to hold off a little bit with all this rain, even though our roof is not that old. She was outside. She noticed moss growing on her roof, and I'm like,
"That's not good."
No, it's not. And
for some people, it may look good, but that's not good.
It's not good because it will affect. Well, I want you to go over some of the things that we talked about even this morning in our BNI class about, the things that you all do and how you configure what's the best homeowners policy, and how you go about figuring out what that value, the cost value,
the replacement cost value,
and the replacement cost value, and the detail that State Farm does to make sure they're protecting their people and their biggest asset. I mean, you've got to protect. This is your biggest asset, right? It's not just a vehicle. It's where your family lives and grows. So tell us a little bit about what you shared with us in BNI today about the process that you all go through.
Yeah, no, I mean, your house is going to hold hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in value.
Right.
It's an asset that should appreciate over time, but if you don't take care of it, it can depreciate.
Right.
One of the things I think that we do very uniquely at State Farm is that we keep our policies pretty straight line and simple. We don't have a lot of variations in terms of what we cover. We're going to cover everything at replacement cost. And we've seen some companies that have started to come up with lower pricing. is I always see somebody that's doing a comparison. Oh, I've got company X and they're $800 less.
What are they really
what are they
truly
really doing?
covering?
They haven't reinvented insurance. They're doing
Right.
something different and they're covering it differently. Is that immediately available on your quote? No.
No.
Is it in an endorsement on page 37, paragraph 6 of line 7 of the policy? Yeah, sure. If you're going to stay up at night and realize all that, we have not done that and won't do that.
Right. Well, that's why you're number one.
Well, that's why we've stayed number one for a long year, because we just keep it simple and straightforward.
Right.
But I think one of the things that we started doing, 15, 20, maybe even 25 years ago, was we partnered with a company called Verisk. And I don't know that everyone can see this. It's not really important other than this is a quarterly report that we get that shows pricing down to a zip code for things like wood, for drywall, for paint, all the materials that go into the house. This company understands down to a zip code what they cost.
It also, as we all know, different zip codes bring different values.
Absolutely,
correct?
absolutely. So, and yet beyond just the material cost, we look at the labor rates. What are the contractors in that area? What are the subcontractors charging? Because it's the combination of the people that are going to do the work on the house along with the materials, and it's gone up so much in the last couple of years.
Well, just like your home values have gone up.
And it's related. I mean, as the values, as it costs more to rebuild that home, there's more residual value that's coming into the home. But we're not covering that market price. What you're going to ultimately sell the home for, there may be land that's involved. Right. We're not focused on the land. We're protecting the home because it's a homeowner's policy. Right. But we'll go through and really research the house. Okay. So when someone calls us and says, hey, I need a quote really quickly, why? Why are we in a rush? Right. It's going to take us 20 to 30 minutes to really look up the house, see the pictures. If it's a house that's for sale, it's easy. We can look at one of your listings and see exactly all the pictures for the house, see what the composition of the flooring is, how much of it's carpet, hardwood, tile, whatever it may be. What are the cabinets? We're going to capture all of that. Formica versus quartz. Quartz, marble, things, right. A butcher block. I had somebody that's putting in butcher block countertops. Great, but that's, again, I want to know those because guess what? That's what we need to replace if there is a fire. If there is a tornado like we had almost 5 years ago, we want to know those so we can go off of that. And yet, when we know all those characteristics, we know the pricing that this company gives us, right. We get a really exact number. And I always find it funny that when some of our customers will come back and say, well, I got this quote from some, I said, did you notice how they quoted you the exact same price? How did they go through a similar exercise and get the exact? It's like trying to come up with the same math equation and get to the exact same. They didn't. They just matched it and threw a kitchen sink of discounts on there. And they'll do that to get you to switch. But then over time, and sometimes
then when you've got a claim.
When you have a claim, that's the biggest part. If you're constantly switching, I always tell people, I find some people interesting that they're like, oh, I shop my insurance every couple of years. Why? Well, I get a good deal. Well, with wireless or internet, I get it. But there's not a downside. With insurance, when you're shopping every 2 or 3 years, if you have a loss and have just a string of some bad luck on your auto insurance or your homeowners, you run the risk of being canceled. Because every insurance company has an equation that says, hey, look, this customer's with us for this long, this number of claims in this period of time, and every company's got a formula. I feel ours is probably the most lenient. The longer you stay with us, the more we're willing to absorb some of those costs.
Well, it's all in building relationships.
It is.
I mean,
you get to know your customers, you know exactly where they're going to be, and yet people that look at it more of like a home warranty and trying to file things for a refrigerator that's leaked and try to, and the leak may lead to damage on the floor, but the refrigerator may not be covered. So all those things, we try to go in and look at this and get that exact. And we know for Chattanooga, Chattanooga, North Georgia, we know what a cost per square foot should be for the house. Right. We can look at it subjectively and say, hey, that's an older house, and that's going to be a little lower in that range. We know the ranges.
Like we do as real estate agents, we don't want to overprice our homes, right? And so we kind of look at that cost per square foot and compare apples to apples.
But you're applying the good school districts in that zone for that house.
Exactly.
You're applying the land value where we're looking just at the house. House. We're looking at a replacement cost for the house, not what's the market value.
Right, because my value, I may be selling a home that is a fantastic home, and let's say it's on 10 acres. Yep. Well, you're not insuring the 10 acres. You're insuring the cost of the actual structure that's on the 10 acres.
Exactly.
And so, that's where the experts have to come in and say, this is where you need to be.
And at the end of the day, when we go through this exercise and we find that down to some sort of multiple of $100 of cost of the house, when we review that with you, and you sit there and can understand our explanation of why that should be in this range, and we're in that range, and that's our goal every single time is to be in the range. when we agree to that replacement cost value, and sometimes it's a struggle because someone's buying a house for this. Don't forget the land. But when we get to that, State Farm does something very unique that no one else in the industry that I'm aware of that does. And we look at this, we compare other companies. We include another 20% of dwelling coverage at no extra cost.
Oh, wow.
We actually go
Okay.
through and say, hey, look, what happens if wood goes up like it did a few years ago?
Like when
It
COVID
skyrocketed.
hit.
COVID hit and it went crazy.
Well, garage
We had some
doors,
people,
windows, everything.
we had some people that, on just their basic coverage, they were potentially exceeding that where that 20%, if they would have had a loss, it came through. That 20% is something we just feel is a good practice. It's helped some people that have forgotten when they make changes to their house, they redo a kitchen, they redo a bathroom, they add on an addition. The one that usually is the one that people don't, when they have an unfinished basement and they finish it.
Right.
We had a scenario in the tornado, you've heard it multiple times from me, but a unfinished basement that comes back through isn't accounted for in the overall coverage. And we didn't have enough coverage. That 20% came in and saved that homeowner, allowed us to take a house that we insured for $238,000 and write a check for $308 just to rebuild the house because it was destroyed. It had to be completely rebuilt.
Right.
But at $238, it wasn't going to be rebuilt. At $308, it was.
Well, let's kind of point that out a little bit because I've done this business for 22 years, so I've had a lot of clients that lived in a home they've sold, and I've done multiple transactions with them. So let's say I sold them a home 7 years ago, and then they're ready to list. Things have changed in their life; they're either downsizing, moving up, whatever. And I go back to reassess, and they've done like additions. They've done so many upgrades and all the things that they talked about they were going to do, right, when they purchased it the first time. So that is important too, to let your insurance agent know, hey, I have upgraded this. I've done this because we know that home values have risen in the past 7 years, no doubt. I can even give you, like, I think Hickson, I looked at it the other day because I was showing it 7% increase every year so far. But knowing your market and knowing those things, it's important to be able to have your insurance on the same page as you, so that if something does happen, you're not at that 280 when it's really going to cost you 350.
Well, warning, gratuitous plug at the Jon LaKamp State Farm. We'll reach out a couple times every year. We do it on each one of the renewals to ask, hey, look, has things changed? And a lot of times we don't get people that will respond, but we're going to reach out every year and ask. And we always, hey, there may be something. And sometimes it's amazing how people kind of will come in and, I'm not really sure. Oh, that's right. I didn't think. And we're asking probing questions to kind of get to some of those things.
Right.
That
to save them later, right?
Save them later.
I mean, it's all about their
helping them understand the things that change in life that evolve as we get older, that you don't think is important to insurance. And I think sometimes people, well, you're going to charge me no more. Well, I'd rather make sure you'll be surprised how little that really
a little
is.
Bit of charge for when it comes down to the amount.
But I want to avoid the situation like the one where we had the house that was only insured for $238,000. I thought we weren't going to have enough, but our adjuster was able to use that coverage, and we were able to help them completely rebuild without being upside down on the house. So important.
So let me ask you this, because there's certain areas in Chattanooga. I know East Ridge is one of them. I know, Red Bank is actually even one of them, where people have, and I just sold one not long ago over in Spring Valley where they had to have flood insurance.
Yeah, flood.
So how does flood insurance work? It's separate policy from your homeowners, obviously. You have to get with FEMA and see what the elevation and all that kind of stuff is. Yeah. So, is that a separate policy that you would do as well for the flood insurance?
Correct.
Okay.
Separate program. The FEMA has a division, the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, where they have a website that we have to be certified agents. We're, again, the Jon LaKamp State Farm is certified in flood. We go through and can look at the address and help get a policy that will meet some of those standards. It's a requirement in a flood zone.
Right.
How do you know if you're in a flood zone? You call us and we can tell you.
Or I can look.
And then usually it's listing, it's on the listing. But then we'll go through and give you some options on, covering just the structure of the home, the structure and the contents. And it just kind of depends. I would, caution a lot of people in Tennessee to say, hey, that's just an extra cost. Well, in Tennessee, we live around a lot of these hills and knobs. And as we've seen, I lived in Nashville for a while, and I was there when some of the flooding happened in, I think it was 2010 or 2011, where just massive flooding. And this rain that hits these hillsides, it flows downhill. So if you're at the base of one of these knobs or one of these hills, I remember driving by one where Their backyard, I've drove by it many times. It was probably 20 or 30 feet right before the edge of this slope that went up. And after that flooding several years ago, their whole side of the hill came into and came completely occupied their backyard and was up against the back of the house.
Wow.
And if they didn't have flood insurance, who's digging all that dirt out to
Exactly.
return the backyard and do? If you don't have flood, it's not going to be covered. Any outside water that hits the ground and then gets into your house, if you don't have flood insurance, you're not going to be covered.
Well, and I just saw on the news last night, I think just for the month of May, I can't remember exactly how many inches. It was 17, 18 inches of rain we've had in 1 month of May, as opposed to the history where it was like 3.5 to 4 inches of rain. So that's something, you guys may want to consider talking to your insurance agent right now, because guess what? It's cloudy today. Hopefully
and it doesn't come up a lot. It doesn't come up a lot. And honestly, we try to be a little bit more proactive. If you're in the flood zone, it's going to come up. It's a requirement. Up, but it really is something that when we look and do that research, when we take that time to see the house and the surrounding area, we're going to look and see if you're going to, hey, have you thought about flood? I don't need that. You may not think so, but classic insurance paradigm, you can't go get something that you need when you need it. You have to have it planned out ahead of time. So flood's a big one. The other one, we talked about this a little bit, earthquake. We just had a
4.1.
4.1 magnitude earthquake. We're near a fault line. Are we going to have California type? No. But if we're close and we have some sort of, again, structural foundational damage, if you don't have an endorsement, now that is not a separate policy. It's an endorsement onto your existing homeowners. If you don't have that endorsement, it's not that expensive. It adds some cost, but on a monthly basis, we're talking in the tens of dollars a month. Hundreds of dollars a year.
You get that in Starbucks. Yeah. Well, actually, you can't even get a Starbucks for that.
You might. I'm not the Starbucks queen like you
are.
Well,
I'm not either.
But either way. But it's not much. And it's, again, we always say with homeowners insurance, we're here to help educate and give you options. And
that's what we're here to do.
To do the same thing.
That's educate.
That's why we get along so well.
That's right. Well, I'm going to ask you one last little thing before we wrap up. So, how do you know if you're let's say where the tornadoes came through? Yeah. We got the ones in Ringgold, and then we got the ones that came through East Brainerd, Holly Hills, and all that. Ottawa. How do you know if the Ottawa, Appleton area? How do you know? Okay, am I in a high risk zone?
With tornadoes, you don't. I think
with tornadoes, I lived, maybe not. But.
When I lived down in Florida, and I think the advantage with hurricanes, having lived through, I was actually in New Orleans when Katrina hit. I've lived through multiple scares down in Florida. At least with a hurricane, you kind of have this days of warning. With tornado, you don't know. And it's so random. It's hitting in an instant. If you're lucky enough to hear any kind of horns that are going to get to your basement, get to your safe area in the house, but you just don't know. We've seen some, the Ringgold area, Ottawa, Appleton, and so forth, where they're seemingly funneling through. But to say a prediction zone or whatever, it's not great for tornado.
But very true. But okay, this actually came up not long ago. So a high risk area. There's a place up on Signal Mountain, I think it's Sunset. Anyway, all those homes with being on that cliff. That route. I mean, that would obviously be a high risk area, right? Because those homes started falling.
Sure.
I'm sure there's a lot of things that you have to look at when you're doing something like that with an area.
Absolutely. Well, with whether it's auto insurance or with homeowners, we at State Farm, we look at things in geocodes.
Okay.
So think longitude and latitude, but down to 3-foot segments, where we actually get information from the state and from the police departments on auto accidents. We also obviously are monitoring everything on the homeowner side, but we know risk zones down to 3-foot segments.
Wow.
That's why at one point we had a gentleman that was living on East Brainerd that moved further back, closer to Appleton, and his auto insurance went up. And he said, why? And I turned to him and said, you know what? I don't know. And I called an underwriter and found out he moved from one area on East Brainerd to another area near Hurricane Creek. And Hurricane Creek, there's an intersection, right, where there's a Publix center.
Yes.
It's the one of, if not the, it's either top or second most accidents in Chattanooga.
They had that on the news too, about there are 7 intersections, and they top them of which intersections are the ones where the Chattanooga Police Department actually has the most accidents they report to.
The counties all report that to the state. It all comes through. We get the data. It comes through on a vehicle rating for the auto insurance, where we'll literally see, Are those cars stolen more? So when Kias and Hyundais
Right.
got stolen more several years ago, that caused their insurance to go up as everything else was going up. So they got like kind of a double whammy. But part of one of those ratings is a location. So as this gentleman was now driving through one of the most accident-prone intersections, that's why his insurance went up. I don't like it, but he's going through more risk, and we can measure that. I know
Same
that's
thing
why
with your
insurance.
home.
Well, and that's why insurance companies sometimes have a bad
Right.
name, but we're a business. We're looking
Right.
at and calculating risk, and we do it better than anyone else.
Well, and I believe that full blown about John and State Farm. But yeah, if you all have any questions, because it's not just homeowners insurance, John can help you with your recreational vehicles. Now's the boating season. If you've got boats that you're not sure if they're insured for the amount, and I'm sure that has something to do with reflection on your insurance and the amount of people that are on the lakes and all the things. So, John, how can someone reach you if they've got additional questions or they want to pick your brain about, seeing what State Farm can do for them? How can they reach you?
Well, always call. I mean, I always love having interactions because text interactions, I get certain communications, but sitting down face to face is the best way to do this.
Okay.
Taking some time, and we're only looking for on an annual basis 30 or 40 minutes of just making sure everything's the way it should be. Nothing's changed. But call our office. Our telephone number, 423-894-5568. I'll say that a little bit slower next time, but call us. Schedule a time to meet with myself, any of my team. I have qualified agents that are licensed just like I am.
Okay.
I teach them the same way that I do it is that the way I want them to do it. And as you were mentioning, boats, motorcycles, all, the big one that we also are trying to focus with people and remind them, life insurance,
that's so
protecting
true.
your paycheck
Yes.
with secondary health insurance, because with COVID, if we learned anything, if we're out for an extended period of time, I mean, some of the remote work obviously has allowed for more people to work from home. But if you're missing work for a certain amount of time and aren't earning a paycheck, what do you do to pay your bills?
Right.
We've got some of those solutions that can talk, and they're not full on. Life insurance is more full on, but if you have some sort of unplanned event that causes something, as we always say, bad things happen to good people, and you got a plan. Again, that's another one of those you can't just to hope that it's going to be there without having it set up ahead of time.
So true. Well, we appreciate you all. I'm Wendi Stott with Keller Williams. I am here to help you in all things real estate. Also connect you with the best ones that can help you all things insurance, roofs, whatever. We are just here to help and guide you. So you can reach me as well at 423-718-1350. We appreciate you as always and have a great weekend.